invite their friends into your family circles.
Yeah.
You know, invite their friends to come with you to the park when your family's going to the park. Invite their friends. Be the house. It's back in the day we used to call you want to be the Kool-Aid house. Or back in the old commercials where mom's out there pouring buckets of Kool-Aid to all the neighborhood kids. Yeah. You want to be the Kool-Aid house where all the kids come to you so that you can kind of see.
Parents, it's time to celebrate. The new On Purpose Parents podcast, a Saddleback Parents podcast, has arrived. And we're here to help you win at parenting. As parents ourselves, we know that parenting is the toughest, most important job on the planet. You can't possibly do it alone. And now you don't have to, because we're your people. Connect with us by texting the word parents to the number 83000, visiting us at onpurposeparents.com, and tuning in every Wednesday with Kurt, Grace, and Chris for tips, ideas, and encouragement to help you win at being an on-purpose parent.
Well, hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of On Purpose Parents. I'm Kurt Johnson. I'm the Next Gen pastor at Saddleback Church. And as always, I'm here with Grace Yoon.
Hi, everyone. So glad to be here again.
And producer Chris.
Yeah, baby.
He's in a good mood today.
Producer Chris coming in with a yeah, baby.
Happy.
That almost sounded like a Yogi Bear. Yeah, baby. Yo, baby.
Is that what you were
The
going
average
for?
bear.
Oh, wow.
How about that?
That's good. Do you do impersonations?
No, I
that
was
pretty impressive.
latchkey kid growing up,
Yeah,
so
I
I
was
sat
too.
and watched a lot
I
of
was
cartoons.
Oh, wow.
See, you're watching Yogi Bear. I was watching Bonanza. Come on, man. It was time for Yogi.
I was
Now,
watching
Grace,
Teenage
You're
Mutant
a
Ninja.
lot younger than us, and you know Yogi Bear?
I do know Yogi Bear,
Wow.
but I feel vaguely like it's,
Yeah, you're on the tail end of the
yes,
Yogi
yes.
Bear.
Like I'm aware of
Yeah.
Yogi Bear's existence.
Right. Well, hey, folks, thanks for tuning in. Hopefully, you're having a great 2023. It's off and running. We're a full month into it. By now, 2023 fits like a nice pair of shoes. I hope. I hope it fits like a nice pair of shoes for everybody. If you have not yet caught up, this is only episode 3. So, and it's not like these podcasts don't build on each other. So there's really no need to catch up. But if you're new to the podcast, you can go back and just listen to the first 2 episodes. We talk a little bit more about who we are and all that good stuff and our marriages and how many kids we have, all that good stuff. I think it's in episode 1. Today, now this is pretty early in a podcast run to take a little break. But we're going to take a little break and focus on some questions. Yeah. Because we surveyed a whole bunch of parents at our church. So this is it's a large sample of parents, but from a small area, if that makes sense. So it's just parents from our church that we sampled in Southern California. Not, it's not this widespread surveyed. But we had a lot of responses, and we took probably the 4 or 5 sort of top questions. They came in they came phrased different ways, but Chris, you did a great job of kind of saying, okay, they might have asked the question 3 different ways. This is kind of the question they're asking. And these are sort of like the top 5.
Yep.
And by the way, producer Chris, I never remember our email address. What's our email address?
Parents@saddleback.com.
How do I not remember that? It's like, that's the easiest email address.
It's like right there, parents.
Parents@saddleback.com.
All you need to remember is the word parents.
All you got to remember is the word parents@saddleback.com. But we would love to always get as many questions or suggestions for show topics, parents, as you would like to give us. So just shoot us an email at saddleback@parent. No. What is it?
Parents?
Yes.
@saddleback.com.
Gosh, that's so easy.
It's the easiest things that are the hardest sometimes, right?
Parents@saddleback.com to email us your questions. And every 3 or 4 or 5 episodes, we'll take a pause and we'll focus on some of your felt needs as parents out there. And just a reminder, as always, this whole podcast is dedicated to what we've decided, and there's lots of ways to raise kids, there's lots of goals out there for parenting, but we've decided that for the sake of this conversation that we're leading, the goal of parenting is to raise interdependent, lifelong followers of Jesus who want to make a kingdom contribution. And so our conversation may not always directly revolve around that, but that's the end goal.
Yep.
That's the end goal. And some of you might be wondering, gosh, last episode, you guys just kind of touched on the roles and goals and ages and stages. When are we going to get back to that? We're going to jump back into that in a couple episodes and spend a little bit more time diving into that.
Yeah. And all of those concepts that we've talked about in the first couple podcasts will be trickled in throughout everything that we talk about. And we really are excited about Q&A episodes because like we said in previous podcast episodes, just the 2 that we've had so far, is we want to be a community with you all. It's not just about me and Kurt and Chris sitting around chatting, but we want to hear from you. We want to know what's really going on in your life and what do you want to talk about and what do you want us to talk about. So excited about this because we get to kind of dive into that topic.
Yeah. Okay. So producer Chris,
great.
Why don't you just start rolling into questions? So we've not really, we've looked at these, but we've not spent a ton of time. That way we can kind of just shoot from the hip a little bit.
Yeah, this is a fantastic question. Probably one of the most important questions of all parenting
Look at that
questions.
setup. Look at the setup.
Okay. So it's all downhill. It's all downhill from here.
Wait till you hear. What's the best parenting advice you've ever heard?
Oh. Okay.
Oh, man.
Grace, why don't you jump in on that?
All right. Okay, I'll kick it off. So normally I have a lot of trouble whenever there's a question about like the best because I'm always like, everything is so good. But one advice that I think really sticks out to me in my current life or current stage with my kids right now when they're 10 and 7 years old is actually from my husband Sam. After he read this book, Raising Emotionally Healthy Child or Raising an Emotionally Healthy Child by John Gottman, it spurred a lot of conversations between us. And one of the things I took away from those conversations is that validating and labeling a child's feeling is so powerful in building intimacy and just a lot of positive domino effects. And the key thing here is that is not the same thing as coddling them or condoning bad behavior. Mm-hmm. So let me break that down a bit in how it's been relevant in my life. So let's just say my 7-year-old daughter, this is not a hypothetical, but let's just say I walk by the room and I see my 7-year-old daughter throwing a toy at her 10-year-old sister. And, the 10-year-old sister obviously is upset, says, ow, and then they start like kind of shouting at each other and arguing. My first inclination is to be like, Zoe, you do not do that. You do not throw a toy at someone. I don't care what I don't care what you're feeling. I don't care what the reasoning is. You don't do that. Like you could hurt someone. Like that is not acceptable. And if someone were to come to me in that moment and say, Grace, but how is Zoe feeling? Like where is she coming from? As a parent that, is conscious about wanting to raise a responsible child, I would be like, well, maybe that doesn't matter as much. Like I would be tempted to think that.
I don't care where it's coming from.
Yeah.
I just don't want her to throw toys.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And so I think there was a very strong tendency for me to link those two together, that if we don't approve of the behavior, we can't accept the feelings that's behind that behavior.
Yeah.
But this concept that Sam and I talked about, that validating a child's difficult emotions, they have all these feelings, can be separated from teaching and lesson. So, for example, in that situation where Zoe throws that toy at Karis, for sure, I'm the parent. I can implement disciplines. We can talk about consequences, and I can do that. That's my job. That's my role as a parent. But I could also have a conversation with her where I fully lean into where she was feeling with empathy. And I have found that has been just so transformational in so many interactions. So, for example, in this hypothetical, maybe not so hypothetical situation where I've talked to Zoe, what I found out was they were drawing. Her and her big sister were drawing, and she looked over to her big sister Karis's picture, and it was so much better than hers. And she felt bad about it. She was like, man, my picture stinks. Right. And so she didn't want anyone to look at it. She's like, nobody look at my picture. But then Karis, of course, is like, if you tell someone, don't look at it, they're going to want to look at it.
Right.
So she like grabs the paper and looks at it. And then, of course, Zoe's like, like, I told you not to look at it, threw the toy. Now, previously, my response could have been, oh, Zoe, kind of dismissive of the feeling, like logic it away. Right. Of course, her picture is better than you. She has 3 years more experience than you. Right. You shouldn't feel like that, Zoe.
Right.
But telling a child what they shouldn't feel when they're actually feeling it doesn't work. And so
I'm jumping in, but
yeah, absolutely.
You got my mind going.
Yeah.
Or expecting our children to process and emote the way we as adults would process and emote.
Right.
She's processing and emoting the way a 7-year-old does.
Yeah.
Right? It's different than how mom and dad do.
Yeah. And as a parent, though, it's so hard because it makes so much sense to you.
Right.
Like, oh, Zoe, that's no, you shouldn't feel like that. Don't feel like that. It's okay. And I thought that was like encouraging, like, of course she's better than you, you know? But instead, now one of the things that, you know, I remind myself to do, and it's made a huge difference, is, you know, I could respond something like, oh, wow, Zoe, that's such a terrible feeling. I'm so sorry. Like, it feels really bad when we feel like we're not good enough. And it makes us want to hide, right? It makes you maybe feel embarrassed. And it's also not a good feeling when someone does something you don't want them to do and, you know, kind of highlights the thing that makes you feel embarrassed. So giving them words, giving them labels, and usually what will happen is she's my big feeler. She'll run into my arms and we'll kind of hug and stay in that feeling for a bit. And then we can have a really productive conversation about like better thoughts that she might be able to have, or new thoughts that she could have about the situation, and or better behavioral decisions she could make.
And I don't hear you saying, hey, you don't have tough conversations. Hey, there's no consequences ever for throwing your toys.
Right.
You're not saying that. You're saying maybe you don't lead with that, right? And you give them an opportunity to express how they're feeling. You validate why they're feeling or why they might be feeling that way.
Yeah.
And at some point you might say, well, when you feel embarrassed or when you feel like you're not good enough, what might be another way to respond other than throwing your toy, right? And so you're still, the bar is the same.
Yep.
The bar is the same. It's not good to throw your toys. How you are helping your child get to that conclusion is what you're suggesting maybe is a different path.
Yeah, the delivery, the package, but also feeling accepted in where they're at.
That's good. Wow. Okay, so that's really like powerful and deep, and you got it from a book, and it's changed your parenting. Mine are a little bit different. I wrote down two because one's real super quick, and then I'll camp out on the other one for a second. But one of the best pieces of parenting advice I ever got was, I can't remember who it was that told me, but it was basically, hey, Kurt, just always remember this too shall pass. This too shall pass. Like whatever's going on in your kid's life, whatever you're frustrated about, the struggles they're having, it's going to pass. You know, it's a phase, it's a stage. They won't always roll their eyes at you when you ask them to do their chores. They won't always, you know, complain about their curfew. They won't whatever it is, right? Whatever it is that's really frustrating, this too shall pass. Yeah. So there's always light at the end of the tunnel.
And you can say that.
And I can say that because I have adult kids, and I would say, yeah, you know, there's always light at the end of the tunnel. Sometimes it's a little teeny pinpoint of light, and sometimes it's pretty big, right? But there's always light at the other end of the tunnel. This too shall pass. The more, I think, profound, and what I would say the more significant parenting advice I ever got, because we saw it completely change how we parented our younger son as he was older. He was a teenager, but when my son was in high school, especially like his senior year, he was really struggling academically and didn't care. Like he didn't care. He wasn't bothered by it. He just, you know, everybody loved him. Everybody thought he was awesome. He's a great kid. He is a great kid. Academics he could care less about, and I was really frustrated. I'm not a big academic, but you know, I think it kind of matters,
right? You want them to care.
Yeah, I want them to care. And so one of our church members owns this smoothie shop right down the street, and I used to go in there all the time. And I was in there one day, and he's a couple years older than I am, so he's at a different season of parenting, you know. And he comments, he goes, man, I sure do love seeing Cole's pictures on Instagram, because my son, you know, used to like to take pictures, and still does. And he said, I just like, he's such a great kid. He's such a great kid. And then I made this kind of quick, snarky remark. Oh, he is. If I could just get him to you know, get better grades.
Yeah.
And then he says, well, why? And I said, well, so he can graduate high school. Oh, well, why? And I said, well, you know, so he can graduate from college someday. Well, why do you want him to graduate from college someday? And I said, I go, I don't know, Mike, so that he can be a contributing member of society. And then he pauses and he says, hey, Kurt, is there anything that Cole's passionate about? And I said, yeah, it's photography. And he goes, okay. He said, well, maybe instead of trying to light a fire where there isn't one, What if you just pour gasoline on the fire? Why don't you just shift your focus? You're trying to pour gasoline on a fire that doesn't exist. Why don't you pour gasoline on the fire of his passions?
Wow.
And it was like this aha moment of, oh my gosh. And so Rachel and I, we literally went and I talked to her about it and we prayed and we thought. And so we sat Cole down. We said, hey, here's the deal. We're done. We're done hounding you about your grades, your homework, your project. You're going to do with school what you choose to do with school. It's on you. It's not, we're not worried about it. There's this thing called the law of natural consequences, which I'll probably refer to a bunch at some point, but it's on you. Yeah. And we said, our goal as parents is to help you win and help you get to where you want to go in life. And so we basically told them, look, we're all about, if you love photography and all that, then we'll help you figure that out. And we just kind of shifted our focus and started cheering him on with his photography and started, paying for some of his equipment. And if you fast forward, he did not he dropped out of college. And now he is a motion graphic artist and does wedding photography and videos on the side and is very successful for a young man in his wheelhouse and probably would have gotten there with or without us pouring gas on it.
Right.
But what that did is it took so much of the pressure off. So parents, do with that what you want, but I would just suggest, thinking through, and it's different at different ages of how much pressure do you apply in the areas that you just kind of say, but they matter. They matter regardless. They matter.
Right.
And how much pressure or gas, like where are you pouring your fuel and what percentage of fuel are you pouring on what things, I think is worth considering. Because I think we oftentimes just pour all the gas on grades. Yeah. Or all the gas on sports, right? Or all the gas on respect your sister, don't throw toys.
Right.
And we put all the gas on that, right? To try to like fix that or whatever it might be. And maybe there's just a different way to think that through.
That's awesome. Kurt, what was that one phrase that you said? Because I want to make sure I get it in my head. It was so good. It was like, why do we pour or try to light a fire?
It doesn't exist.
It exists instead of pouring
gas on an existing fire.
Oh, I love that. I think there's a lot of truth to unpack there. And I'll just respond and say, I do think there's a lot of pressure for parents to try to mold your kid into a certain kind of robotic image, because that's kind of what we're told. That's what a successful kid is.
Right.
It's very hard to try to acknowledge your kids for their own uniqueness and their own unique passions.
Oh,
that
yeah.
can be hard.
Where it gets really like just super practical is, maybe you're a dad who grew up playing sports and your son, I'll just go to the classic, what I hear all the time as a youth pastor. Your son is a gamer, right? All your son wants to do is play video games. You grew up playing sports. And so many dads, they waste time. And I actually think they waste like relational equity, relational chips by trying to get their kid into sports instead of saying, hey, you're really good at video games.
Yeah.
How about if I play a video game? Instead of let's go outside for a catch, let me stay inside with you and play a video game.
Yeah, that's
right?
really good.
I mean, the goal is time with your kid.
Yeah.
So to do it in their world and the place where they're passionate versus trying to pour fire or pour gas on a fire that doesn't even exist.
Yeah. I love that. Awesome.
We got to move faster, Chris. Give us another one.
That's great. Okay. How do I help my kids choose good friends?
Oh, man.
How about you kick off this one, Kurt?
My first thought is that I think might be one of the more important questions, right? Because we all know how influential friendships are.
Definitely.
The old saying, if you want to see what your life's going to be like in 5 years, just look at who you're hanging out with now, right? And that's probably not true with a 4-year-old, but it's for sure true like with a 15-year-old. You want to know what your life's going to be like when you're 20? Who are you hanging out with when you're 15?
Yeah.
Friendships are a really, really big deal. Here's just a couple thoughts. These are just super practical when it comes to helping your kids make good friends. One is just to remember, for the most part, and unless you feel like you got to step in and not allow friendships, which sometimes you have to do, but for the most part, your kids are going to make friends with who they choose to make friends with.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's sort of like you can't stop love. Like they're gonna like the girl they like.
Yeah.
And how do you stop the love, right?
Yeah.
And friendships are kind of the same way. Is they're going to become friends with who they become friends with. You can limit influence if you see things unhealthy, but But how do you help? It kind of comes back to your conversation about the feelings. Is one of the thoughts I have is just talk, right? Like communication is the key to most parenting issues. Having open lines of communication, validating how they feel. One thing I love, Grace, is if you're validating how they feel when they're 7 years old.
Yeah.
And you're not judging them, you're not just punishing them, you're not just fixing the behavior, but you're validating, you're valuing as you're raising. Then by the time they're a little bit older and their friendship choices have more consequence, they're probably more likely to engage in conversation with you about it because you've always been a mom who talks to them, right? If you're an overreactive parent, then that shuts down communication. So in our youth ministry, we have a saying, freak out on the inside, but stay calm on the outside. I think that's that might be the best parenting advice is, freak out on the inside, stay calm on the outside. So even if you're super concerned about their friendship and you're freaking out their friendship choices on the inside, stay calm on the outside and help them process. So communicate. Some basic stuff would be invite their friends into your family circles. Invite their friends to come with you to the park when your family's going to the park. Invite their friends. Be the house. It's back in the day we used to call you want to be the Kool-Aid house. Or back in the old commercials where mom's out there pouring buckets of Kool-Aid to all the neighborhood kids. You want to be the Kool-Aid house where all the kids come to you so that you can kind of see. Right. Sometimes we overreact. We assume things about the kids because of what we've heard or the family they come from. Sometimes we underreact and we assume the best when maybe we shouldn't, right? But you don't know unless you have proximity. So be in proximity with your kids' friends.
That's good.
And ask your kids questions about their friends. Not in a I don't trust you overbearing, but when one of the friends gets in trouble at school, hey, talk to me about that. What was the choice they made that got them in trouble at school? How would you have responded? What are you doing to encourage your friend that's going through a tough time? Hey, this is what I've seen in your friendships. Do you feel the same way? Hey, I see this behavior that's not super awesome when the two of you are together. Am I missing something? Help me figure that out. Just being in open lines of communication. And I think talking to them about, hey, here's what to look for in a friendship. Like, don't leave it totally to chance. Give them some good input. Hey, here's the things I think are important in a friendship for you to consider.
Yeah, I love that. I love what you said or how you just modeled for us asking those questions to your kids, because even what I felt, kind of imagining being like your kid, it makes me think for myself. What did I think about that? Like when my friend was mean to another friend, it's like, instead of you coming in and just saying, no, that person's a bad person, don't hang out with them. And then it's not really my own thinking. It's like you're questioning that communication piece that you're talking about is drawing from me like, oh, well, what is my own opinion about this? Right. Like, is this like what I want? Is this how I want to behave? Is this the type of friends I want to associate with? And starting to think. So that's really good. That's all great. I think the only thing I would add to this one is something that might seem a little counterintuitive is that if you are worried or focused about your friends choosing good friends, and this is maybe for the younger kids or parents with younger kids, is to not worry so much about pushing your kids out and making friends and being out there as much as teaching them these relationship skills inside the house. I do think that the home is where they learn all these skills. It's not really outside the house. I mean, the home is the best place, the safe place you can practice. And if they have siblings, that's a really great, opportunity. But even if they don't have siblings, between the parent and the child, listening, being patient, taking turns, learning to forgive each other, saying sorry from the parent to the kid to the parent, like all those things are really positive things that you could teach inside the house. And if you are very specific about affirming positive relationship values, like you said, I think it all goes back to, Kurt, the communication piece, and actually verbalizing affirmations of things that you value in relationships, your kids, I believe, will have more inclination to value that as well. So like being direct, like, thank you so much. I really appreciated how you listened to me so well there. Or thanks for, helping me clean up. Or thanks for being patient with me here. I was feeling a little tired and, wasn't in a great mood. Or just kind of affirming those positive values in relationships, because what you affirm is, I think, what grows. And so not being so worried about, oh my gosh, I need to make sure my friend is like, my kid is the most popular and makes all these friends and has all these play dates early on when they're young. I think you can keep them close to the house and really be intentional.
One real practical thought, parents, is, and again, this might be a little bit more practical when your child's maybe in middle school or older.
Yeah.
But a cool exercise would be like get a sheet of paper and draw 3 circles, kind of like a target. And the inner circle is your core friends. The next circle is your close friends. The next circle is your casual friends.
Yeah.
And have them write the names, right? Of who these are my casual friends would be like kids you hang out with school.
Yeah.
Maybe they're the friends on your sports team. Your close friends are the ones that you're spending a little bit more time with. You might hang out at the movies, or you might play video games online together, or whatever. And then your core friends are like your buddies.
Yeah.
They're the ones who, if you can only have 1 or 2 kids over for a sleepover, that's who you're having. If you're only going to invite 1 or 2 kids to the birthday party, that's who they're inviting. These are their buddies.
Yeah.
And then kind of talk through, well, what are the qualities of each? And the idea being I think it's actually kind of healthy to have casual friends who are very, very different from us in lots of ways.
Yeah.
Our worldviews, our backgrounds, all of the things, right? Because like kids who are or maybe kids who are really struggling, and they're far from healthy relationships. And in our context, we would say that maybe they're far from Jesus, right? Like you want your middle school daughter to have some casual friends, because who's going to help those casual friendships thrive, right? But the core friends, your closest buddies, probably should be friends who share some commonalities in the things that are most important.
That's good.
How do you feel about honesty and respecting our teachers at school, and maybe even like faith and Jesus, and like the closer your friends are, the more important it is that there is some common ground, and iron. The Bible calls it iron sharpening iron, right? Like how are you rubbing off on each other is pretty important. The closer they get to you.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, great question. Thank you.
Those are great. Okay, we've got another great question. What are some ways to get my child to talk with me?
Well, producer Chris, we haven't even let you answer a question. You're just sitting over there so diligently waiting to Why don't you give us, you've raised some great kids. My hunch is you're pretty communicative. That's a very big word, and I said it properly.
Do you use your accents, to break the ice?
Well, some ways to get my child to talk with me. I need to be a better listener as a dad, so that they would think that, and this has gone back so many years with me, that I'm not the one who's doing the talking and sit down with them when I have something to say to them, but more open that line of communication where they'll just share with me their lives, and I'll be able to listen and ask good questions with that. But I think that with me, I'm always looking for what's the best time that would work out. What's the best way to say it? What's the best thing to say, right? And then just kind of looking at the place too and having conversations. So I would take my kids out one-on-one a lot. And I think as you start doing things like that, they're going to be more apt to sharing with you when you're in the car, when you're at the game, or things like that. So my kids call me now, which is fantastic. They're all moved out of the house. You're
in the consultant stage of parenting.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure.
And if you don't know what Kurt is talking about, definitely check out episode 2.
Yep.
Yeah. And and then my son last night just dropped by. He was kind of in the area, and he just drove over and dropped by just to talk and hang out. And that was cultivated since they were younger. and just listening to them and paying attention to them and valuing them.
Well, I'll add to that because what you're saying is a different way of saying what I would say about how do I get my kids to talk, and I use this word picture, this analogy of like the window of conversation. Every child has a window or a time when their window to talking is open, and they have times when the window is closed, right? And for some kids, their window of conversation is open during bedtime routine. Other kids, their window of conversation is open on the car ride home from school. Other kids, their window of conversation is open on the car ride to school, right?
Yeah.
There's a window. And what happens sometimes is parents also have a window. Mom or dad like to talk to their kids, right? And so instead of trying to get your kids to talk when your window of conversation is open, parents need to figure out, when is my child's window open, and that's when I'm going to crawl through the window of conversation, right? And so it's kind of two questions I would have is, when do they want to talk? That's the window. And what do they love to talk about? And the reason it's good to know what do they love to talk about is lead with that.
Yeah.
Like start sometimes we jump into, we're like too deep, too quick with our kids, right? As opposed to, well, I know my daughter loves to talk about soccer. Okay. Then lead with soccer when her window is open. And you'll be surprised at how easy it becomes to maybe transition the conversation into something that you as a parent want to talk about.
Yeah.
The better you are at that, the better you are at listening, the more likely then they'll begin to initiate conversation. But again, they're going to initiate conversation when their window's open.
Yeah.
And mom and dad, here's the thing. If you have a child that initiates conversation, whether your window's open or closed, you drop what you're doing, you open your window so that you guys can talk.
That's good.
Hey, not now. Can we talk about it later? That's a mistake.
Yeah.
Mom and dad, that's a mistake to say, not right now. Can we talk about it later?
Yeah.
Unless the house is on fire, there's nothing else. There's nothing else more pressing than your son or your daughter is initiating conversation.
Yes.
And so open your window.
Yeah. And it may not be like, you may think, oh my gosh, my window's closed and I don't have time to open the window. But it may just be like a 1 minute conversation. It doesn't necessarily mean your kid is needing they may get bored of you faster than you'll get bored of them. You might get more engaged and they're like, yeah, I'm done now.
Right.
My window's closed again. I love that advice because it's practically really shaped Sam and I's parenting as well. And we actually heard that with a slightly different illustration on a resource that's available on our Saddleback Parents website. I think there's these video clips that are called Parent 2-minute Tips.
2-minute tips.
Yeah. And I had heard about it from someone and I had just listened to it a few years back. And there was one 2-minute tip where someone talked about a clam opening up and shutting.
Yep.
And that when the clam, it's like analogous to what you just talked about, the window of opportunity. And that concept really stuck with me and it totally works. Okay. It's just so helpful in framing. And Chris, what you were talking about, starting off with listening is so powerful too. I just read like a little meme on Instagram today. I don't remember the quote exactly, but it was saying like, be interested in what your kids are interested when they're little for the small stuff. Because then when they're big, they'll come to you for the big stuff because it's always been big stuff for them. Right. So just kind of appreciating whatever the topic is,
Yeah. Well, Grace, gosh, you just hit such an important piece of parenting wisdom. I was gonna say you probably didn't even know it.
I know. Tell me.
But you probably do know it because
educate me.
you're a great parent. And that is when you said that if you care about the little stuff, then they'll know you care when the stuff's bigger. And by the way, it's always been big to them.
Yeah.
I think one of the great wisdom of parenting little nuggets is remember everything's big to your kids. So when your son is freaking out because his hair won't go the right direction, right? It goes back to your validating feelings.
Right.
We all know that whether your hair goes right, nobody's going to notice your hair is going the wrong direction.
Yes.
No, wow, how awesome do you think you must be? That everybody's going to be paying attention to what direction your hair is going, right? But to him, it's a big deal. When your daughter gets a pimple, it's a big deal to her.
Oh, yeah.
When they had a little spat with a friend, And you want to say, don't worry about it. Tomorrow morning, you're going to be best friends again.
Yeah.
Just learn to shake it off.
Yeah.
It's a big deal to them.
It is.
And I think the more we can validate and recognize that the stuff our kids are going through, we know.
Yeah.
Looking in the rearview mirror, we know that most of it is very inconsequential to where they're headed. Right. But it matters to them today.
Yeah.
And the more we can validate that and lean into that, then when the issues do become consequential, we've earned the trust, we've earned the right, we've put the relational chips in the pocket for us to lean in and go, hey, you know what? We need to talk about this.
Yeah, that's great.
So anyway, I think we should cut there. I know we've got a whole bucket load of questions from the survey. We're going to have a whole bunch more when you listeners email us at parents@saddleback.com. Hey, I've been chewing on that the whole time.
You got it. You redeemed yourself.
Parents@saddleback.com. Shoot us a question. Shoot us a topic of conversation that you'd love us to have here on Saddleback Parents. Chris, what are some of the other, where can they find our Instagram, our resources? Grace referenced the 2-minute tips.
Yeah.
Kind of give everybody where they can find us.
Yeah, our website, onpurposeparents.com. Also Instagram, you can follow us at Saddleback Parents. And if you text the word parents to the number 83,000, we have weekly tips and encouragement that goes out as well.
Those are great. Cool. I've signed up and they're very helpful. Cool. Yeah. Just a quick little reminder. So thank you everyone for filling out that survey, sending the questions. We really feel them. We feel the stories behind them and the questions and the struggles and the challenges that parents face. And we just want to remind you guys again that we are here for you. We're in your corner. We're your people. We want to hear from you and excited to continue this journey with you all.
Thanks for joining the On Purpose Parents podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, you can help us by rating and reviewing our podcast on iTunes. If you're listening on our Saddleback Parents YouTube channel, please like and leave a comment. Also, remember to subscribe to our podcast and share it with your friends. You can connect with us by texting the word parents to the number 83000, following us on Instagram @SaddlebackParents, and emailing your comments to parents@saddleback.com. As a huge thank you, you can browse our hundreds of free resources at onpurposeparents.com, all created to help you win at parenting. We'll catch you next time.